My name is Paige. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a licensed occupational therapist with a small consulting practice in Nashville, Tennessee. On a Sunday morning in October, I woke up in my childhood bedroom to find that $83,000, every single dollar I had saved over 7 years to open my own clinic, was gone. When I walked downstairs and found my sister-in-law in the kitchen, standing at the counter in her silk pajamas pouring herself a cup of coffee, she looked at me over the rim of the mug with those perfectly steady eyes and said, very quietly, "We were going to pay it back, Paige. You weren't supposed to see it yet." That one sentence told me everything I needed to know about the kind of person I had been sharing Sunday dinners with for 5 years. But let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the before. I grew up in a small house in Murfreesboro with my parents and my brother Tyler. Tyler is 4 years older than me, and for most of my life, I genuinely believed he was the most decent person I knew. He coached my soccer team when he was 17 and I was 13. He drove 4 hours to help me move into my college dorm. When I passed my licensing exam, he was the first person I called, and he cried, standing in a parking lot somewhere in Memphis. I loved my brother completely and without reservation. That love is important to understand because it is the exact reason I didn't see what was happening until it was already done. He met Dana when he was 28 and she was 26. She was beautiful in the effortless, low-maintenance way that makes other women feel immediately self-conscious. She had bright eyes and a quick laugh, and a talent for making you feel, in any conversation, like you were the only person in the room who mattered. My parents adored her on sight. I told myself I liked her too, and for a while, I think I almost did. There were small things, though. The kind of things you file away and then feel guilty for filing. She and Tyler bought a house in Brentwood 2 years into their marriage that seemed, to my eye, like a stretch. A big stretch. They both had decent incomes. Tyler managed a distribution warehouse and Dana did sales for a pharmaceutical company, but that house had 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, and a kitchen that had been renovated twice in 3 years. When I asked Tyler once, lightly, offhandedly, how they were managing the mortgage, he waved it off. "Dana's got it handled," he said. "She's smart with money." I accepted that. Tyler trusted her, and I trusted Tyler. The other thing I noticed, over time, was how Dana talked about my work. Not dismissively, she was too smart for that, but with a particular brand of brightness that felt performative. "Oh, you're building something so special, Paige. God, I can't imagine having your discipline." Once, at Christmas, she asked me very directly how much I had saved toward the clinic. I told her the number. I think I said around 80,000, and she nodded slowly, like she was making a note. I remember feeling slightly uncomfortable. I didn't know why. I told myself I was being uncharitable. 7 years is a long time to save $83,000 when you're also paying off student loans and renting an apartment and trying to live like a normal human being. I did it by working 2 part-time consulting contracts on top of my full-time job, taking on home health visits on weekends, and saying no to so many things that by the time I had the money in the account, the discipline itself had become a kind of identity. I didn't take vacations. I drove a 2014 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I said no to my friends' bachelorette trips and Europe plans and spontaneous weekends in Nashville. Every single dollar in that account had its own story, its own sacrifice behind it. That $83,000 was not money to me. It was time. It was choices. It was my entire future, bottled up and waiting. The October weekend that changed everything started with a phone call from Tyler. "Mom's turning 60 in December," he said. "Dana and I want to do something big, a real surprise party. Can you come down this weekend? We need to start planning." I said yes without a second thought. Of course I did. It was my mother's 60th birthday. I drove down on a Friday evening and walked into their house to find Dana had already set up a little planning station at the kitchen island. Printed color swatches, a guest list, a spreadsheet open on her laptop. I was genuinely touched. It looked like so much work. We sat there for 2 hours going through vendors, venues, catering options. Tyler was in and out, mostly watching football in the next room. Dana was warm and focused and funny. She made us both hot toddies. I remember thinking, not for the first time, that I should make more of an effort with her. At some point late in the evening, Dana said she'd found a way to consolidate all the party payments through one shared account so everything could be tracked cleanly. Vendors, deposits, the venue rental. "I can set it up through my bank," she said, tapping the laptop. "They have this family pooling feature. Super easy. You just need to link your account to authorize your contribution, and then everything runs through one portal. I want to stop here and tell you something. because I know what some of you are already thinking. You're thinking, why would she ever do that? Why would a grown woman with a business background hand over her banking credentials to link an account at her sister-in-law's suggestion? And I want you to sit with that question, because I have sat with it too, for months, and the answer is not stupidity. The answer is trust. The answer is that I was sitting in my brother's kitchen, drinking something warm, planning a party for my mother, and the person asking me was someone I had been told was family for 5 years. Manipulation does not look like manipulation when it is coming from inside the house. That is the entire point. I typed in my business account login on her laptop. I authorized what she described as a read-only link. I didn't think about it for more than 30 seconds. Then we went back to talking about flower arrangements. I woke the next morning to my phone buzzing against the nightstand. Once, twice, then in a rapid, breathless series that made me sit straight up in the dark. Transaction alerts. I opened my banking app with the particular slowness of someone who already knows something is wrong. The balance in my business savings account was $214. Yesterday, it had held $83,000. I sat in that bed for a full minute, completely still. I closed the app. I forced it closed, fully, and reopened it. The number did not change. Then I scrolled through the transaction history and watched my entire future unspool in 8 neat transfers, all processed between midnight and 4 in the morning, all routed to an account I didn't recognize. I did not scream. I did not cry, though I wanted to. What I felt was not grief, not yet. What I felt was a cold, descending clarity. The same feeling I get when a patient's chart suddenly reveals a pattern I should have caught 3 appointments ago. The laptop, the family pooling portal, the careful, specific question about how much I had saved, the 30 seconds I spent typing my credentials while Dana smiled beside me. I put my phone down, I breathed, then I got up, got dressed, and walked downstairs. Dana was in the kitchen. Silk pajamas, coffee, the picture of a Sunday morning. I said her name. She turned around and looked at me, and I want to be precise about what I saw on her face. It was not surprise. It was not guilt. It was the look of someone who had already rehearsed this moment and had decided on an approach. Calm, measured, almost gentle. We were going to pay it back, Paige. You weren't supposed to see it yet. I asked her where my money was. She set down her mug. She said that she and Tyler had been dealing with some financial pressure, that they had needed a short-term solution, that she had planned to move the money back before I noticed. She said it the way you might explain borrowing someone's umbrella without asking. Matter of fact. Slightly inconvenienced by the awkwardness of being caught. I asked her if Tyler knew. She said, I'll explain everything. Just let me talk to him first. I walked out of that kitchen. I walked to the back patio and sat down in the cold morning air and called my bank's fraud line from memory because I had saved the number 2 years earlier in the cautious, preparatory way that I did most things. While I was on hold, I stared at the neighbor's maple tree and thought about 7 years. About the weekends I hadn't taken off. About the vacation I hadn't gone on. About all the times someone had asked me why I didn't just loosen up a little and I had smiled and said I was saving for something important. The fraud representative confirmed what I already knew. The transfers had been authorized using my credentials from a device I didn't own, during hours I was asleep. The destination accounts were new. Most of the money was already gone. Tyler came outside 20 minutes later. He looked like he hadn't slept. He looked, specifically, like a man who was trying very hard to understand something that kept slipping just out of reach. He sat down across from me and said, Paige, I'm so sorry. I need you to know I didn't know she was going to do this. I looked at him for a long moment. I believed him. And I hated that I believed him, because it meant this was more complicated than I needed it to be. I told him I had already called the bank. I told him I was going to call a lawyer. His face went through several things at once: shock, grief, a kind of helpless love, and then he nodded. He didn't argue with me. That mattered. I left before Dana came back outside. I drove to a diner off I-24 and sat in a booth and tried to think clearly. My first call was to my mother's older sister, my Aunt Carol. She spent 30 years as a bank examiner before she retired to Chattanooga, and she is the kind of woman who once told me, when I was 18 and asking her for life advice, that the most important thing anyone could ever learn was the difference between a problem and a crime. Those are 2 different categories, she said. Handle them differently. She answered on the second ring. I told her what had happened. There was a pause. Not the soft, horrified pause of someone processing bad news, the short, percussive pause of someone clicking into professional mode. Don't touch anything on your end, she said. Don't call Dana again. Don't text Tyler about this. Get to a fraud attorney today, not tomorrow. And pull every statement you have going back 12 months. I asked her why 12 months. She said, because a person doesn't do something like this once. That sentence opened a door I hadn't thought to look behind. The attorney Aunt Carol referred me to was a woman named Stephanie, sharp and unhurried in the way of people who have seen too many catastrophes to be rattled by yours specifically. She reviewed the bank records, my account statements, and the transaction logs within 2 hours of our first meeting. Premeditated and deliberate, she said. The credential theft, the timing, the routing to new accounts, this wasn't impulsive. She planned this. She filed a police report that afternoon and submitted an emergency request to freeze any accounts we could trace to Dana. Most of the money was gone, moved fast, in ways that took time to unravel. What Aunt Carol found while helping me pull financial records was the thing that reframed everything. She called me on a Monday night, 3 days after I left that house, and her voice had a quality I hadn't heard before, not sad, not angry, but hollow in the way of someone who has just confirmed something they had hoped wasn't true. I've been making some calls, she said. I know people at 2 of the institutions where those transfers landed. Paige, those weren't personal accounts. She paused. They were debt service accounts, collections, essentially. Dana has been carrying somewhere between $190,000 and $220,000 in gambling debts. Online platforms, mostly, going back at least 3 years. She's been making payments wherever she can scrape the money. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Your brother's joint accounts, Aunt Carol continued, her voice careful and precise. His retirement contribution. 2 refinances on the house she did without his name on the paperwork. I'm not entirely sure how, but I have people looking into it. She has been systematically liquidating everything around her for over 2 years. Your $83,000 wasn't a theft of opportunity, sweetheart. It was a payment on a debt that had already consumed everything else. She was robbing you to survive what she'd already done to him. I thought about Tyler's face on that patio, the particular quality of his shock, the way a man looks when the ground under him has been gone for years, and he just now looked down. He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. That realization changed my grief, but not my course of action. I was not going to allow the fact that my brother was also a victim to become a reason to absorb the loss. That is what people like Dana count on, the idea that love will make you hesitate long enough for accountability to become awkward. I called Stephanie. I told her what Aunt Carol had found. There was a brief silence. Then she said, "This just became a much larger case. I need you to let me contact the district attorney's office." We went back to that house on a Wednesday morning. I was in Stephanie's car. Aunt Carol drove separately. Tyler had been told we were coming. I had called him the night before, and he had sat on the phone with me for a long time, saying almost nothing, just breathing. He stepped aside to let us in without a word. Dana was in the living room. She had clearly prepared for this too, composed, seated, hands folded, the posture of someone who had spent the weekend deciding on a strategy. She looked at Stephanie and then at me and offered a small, almost sympathetic smile, as if she was sorry about the inconvenience of all this. Stephanie opened her briefcase and set a document on the coffee table. "Dana," she said, "this is a formal demand for the return of $83,000 obtained through unauthorized access to my client's financial accounts. Alongside that, the Nashville Metro Police Department has opened a criminal investigation into wire fraud and computer crimes. Additionally," and here she paused, just briefly, "we've referred a second matter to the district attorney's office concerning potential financial elder fraud, account forgery, and unlicensed debt concealment involving your husband's assets." The composure cracked. Not all at once, more like a seam opening. Dana looked at Stephanie, then at me, then, slowly, at Tyler. Tyler was standing in the doorway. He hadn't moved since we walked in. He was looking at his wife with the expression of someone trying to find a familiar face in a stranger's. Aunt Carol stepped forward. She did it quietly, but she changed the air in the room when she did it. "Was my sister's retirement fund collateral, Dana?" she asked. Because our mother Tyler's and my mother had, on Dana's persuasion, allowed Dana to manage one portion of a modest retirement account 18 months ago. We had not known to look there yet. But Aunt Carol had. Dana looked at her hands. "How much of my sister's money did you lose?" Aunt Carol asked again. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Tyler made a sound I had never heard him make before. Not a word, something involuntary, low, like the sound a person makes when the air leaves them suddenly. He walked out of the room. I heard the back door open and close. I didn't follow him. I needed to stay. Dana's attorney, whom she had called over the weekend, arrived 20 minutes later, and the conversation became formal and documented, and cold in the way legal conversations become, when everyone in the room understands the severity. She did not deny the transfers. She could not deny them. The records were unambiguous. Her position, articulated through her lawyer, was that she had intended to return the funds and had been managing a private financial crisis. 2 weeks later, Tyler found the loan documents, both of them, on the house she had refinanced once in his name without his presence, using a notarized signature he had never given, and once in a corporate entity she had created using his information. The house they had bought together, the house with the renovated kitchen, was leveraged past its value and heading toward foreclosure inside of 4 months. The legal proceedings were not quick, but they were decisive. Dana pleaded guilty to wire fraud and financial identity theft to avoid trial. The judgment was extensive. The court ordered the liquidation of several assets, including a vehicle and a brokerage account that her attorney had not managed to conceal fully. I recovered $71,000 of my original $83,000. Not all of it, but enough to begin. My mother's retirement account was assessed. Approximately $34,000 had been lost through Dana's management. The court ordered restitution across both claims. Dana received 3 years of supervised probation, mandatory financial crime counseling, and a permanent prohibition from serving in any fiduciary capacity. Tyler filed for divorce before the sentencing. He moved out of the house and into an apartment in East Nashville and spent a month, by his own account, barely speaking to anyone. I drove down on a Saturday in January with groceries and said nothing useful for about 2 hours. We just sat in his empty apartment eating takeout and watching bad television, and eventually he said, "I should have seen it." And I said, "No, you should have been able to trust the person you married. That's not the same thing." He nodded, and we didn't talk about it again that night. The extended family was complicated, the way families always are when the version of a person they believed in turns out to have been a careful construction. Some people needed time to accept what the documents plainly showed. Some people were kinder than I expected. My mother, who had trusted Dana with a portion of her savings, was quiet for a long time and then said, in the parking lot of the courthouse after the sentencing, "I just want to know that you're going to be okay." And I told her I was, and I meant it. The court-mandated letter arrived 6 weeks after sentencing. I had not expected it to be satisfying, and it wasn't. 2 pages. The word mistake appeared 4 times. The word pressure appeared 3 times. What did not appear, not once, not in any construction, was, "I stole from you." There was a line near the end that read, "I hope you can find a way to understand the circumstances I was in." I read the letter once, all the way through. Then I folded it into thirds and put it in a manila folder. I labeled, simply, "Done." And I meant that too. It's been 10 months. I'm sitting in a small office in the Germantown neighborhood of Nashville, above a coffee shop that smells like cardamom and burned sugar. The walls of this office are painted a pale green that I chose myself after testing 11 samples. On the window I can see, in vinyl lettering that cost me $280, and that I stuck on myself at 7 in the morning before the building manager arrived, the name of my clinic. It is not a big clinic. It is not impressive by any measure that the version of me from 5 years ago would have recognized as success. It is a single suite with 3 treatment rooms and a small reception area, and a waiting room with chairs I found on Facebook Marketplace and reupholstered over a weekend in August. It is entirely mine. Aunt Carol is my bookkeeper. She comes in on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons and drinks terrible coffee from the machine in the break room and keeps my accounts in the kind of precise, unforgiving order that makes me feel, every time I look at them, like the ground beneath me is solid. Tyler is in a better job now, one he should have had years ago, and we talk on the phone most Sundays. He is learning to trust his own judgment again. That takes time. I know that from working with patients. Recovery is not a straight line. It is a practice. I learned something through all of this that I want to say directly, because I think it gets lost in stories like mine. The theft was devastating, but it was also, in a specific way, clarifying. It clarified who was in my corner and who had been borrowing against me. It clarified what I was actually capable of when I stopped being afraid of the discomfort of protecting myself. It clarified that the instinct I had overridden, the small, uncomfortable filing away of things that didn't quite add up, was not paranoia. It was information, and I had the right to act on it. We are raised, women especially, to extend the benefit of the doubt so far past the point of evidence that it becomes its own kind of self-abandonment. We are told that demanding accountability from people we love is the same as not loving them. That is a lie. It is a very old, very useful lie, and it benefits exactly the people you'd expect. You can love someone and also hold them responsible. You can grieve a relationship and also refuse to absorb the damage it caused you. You can be a good person and also, clearly and without apology, protect what you built. You are not required to be a soft place for everyone who knows your name. If this story sat with you in a way that feels familiar, if there's something in your own life that this brought close to the surface, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if you know someone who needed to hear this today, share it with them. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because there are more, and I will keep telling them. I'll see you in the next one.